Hello, everyone. Welcome to the San Juan Symphony. My name is Thomas Heuser, and I'm your music director. And we are very fortunate today to have the opportunity to speak with composer Jerod Impichchaachaaha Tate, who is a citizen of the Chickasaw Nation and a resident of Oklahoma. He's joining us from Oklahoma, University of Oklahoma today. Jerod, thanks for being here.
Chickasaw no Okano, Sohoshifo, Jerod Taloa Ikbi, Impichchaachaaha Tate, Chickasaw Saya, Chickasaw Inki Saya, Impichchaachaaha, Choka Michashawi Iksai, Town Cholo Lili, Taloa Ikbi Li, Hashlaka Asayopa, Chukmashki, Yakoke. Hi, everyone. My name is Jerod Impichchaachaaha Tate, and I'm a citizen of the Chickasaw Nation here in Oklahoma, and I'm a professional classical composer. I'm very, very pleased to be here. This is lots of fun. I love talking about pieces. I'm a composer nerd, so I love doing this. And I really love answering questions. It's lots of fun.
Thank you so much. Before we get started, I do want to take a moment to thank some of the sponsors that made this happen, particularly San Juan County, New Mexico. We're very grateful for the support of our residents of San Juan County there and the wonderful commissioners, as well as the sponsors out of Farmington, New Mexico, the Connie Gotch Arts Foundation, and our friends at Zymes Forward Corners. Thank you all for your support, and of course, all of the San Juan Symphony sponsors that make our seasons possible. We could not do it without you. Jerod, we are playing Chokfi, a work for string orchestra and percussion
Yes.
that has the subtitle Sarcasm for string orchestra and percussion. Tell us a little bit about the gestation of this piece and the meaning behind it.
Absolutely. Well, I was really fortunate to be commissioned by the Oklahoma Youth Orchestras here in Oklahoma City. And they wanted a new work for their younger string ensemble, which was about age 12 to 16. And so I had asked if we could add percussion, and that was green lighted, which is really good. And so I just dove into a piece. So I was okay. My son was at the time maybe 4, I think was his age. And I will say that my son has had a lot of influence on my energy in my pieces, especially he's 10 now, but he's still full of energy. So that has a great impact on me. And also I've been teaching kids for a very, very long time, and I just adore this type of experience. So the reason I'm saying that is because I want to do a piece that I thought was fun, but also pedagogical. So I was feeling very music dad-ish as well. And so I thought, well, what a great opportunity to introduce a lot of the kids to string techniques that maybe they have not exactly played yet or really incorporated into a piece. And so I was thinking about that just as a general music piece, but also a topic. I focus on American Indian topics, and we happen to have a trickster character in my tribe, which is the rabbit. And many tribes have trickster characters. And in fact, many cultures around the world have trickster type characters. And in general, the trickster represents our kind of like a yin and yang. It's like the balance of that, where you have challenges in your life and you also have really good things in your life, and they balance each other out. And the difficulties kind of manifest itself in animals that are giving us a hard time or tricking us, so they're like trickster people. And so for us, for Southeast American Indians, our trickster is the rabbit. Around North America, there's raven, like in the upper Northwest coast. There's also coyote in the plains and spider as well. And so there's different animals that are assigned trickster roles within our cultures. And so ours is rabbit. And, actually that was a great influence on the old musical movie of Disney, Song of the South, where you had Briar Rabbit, the trickster rabbit. But also when you hear like the rabbit and the turtle, the rabbit's thinking he's outsmarting the turtle by being like sloppy and careless and all that kind of stuff, and ends up losing, because tricksters a lot of times end up losing because there's interests, they have self-interests that are not good, so there's lots of that. The trickster is the lesson character. So rabbit is like that. And so just rabbit's got all that energy and very diabolical. And so I thought, what a great combination of feeling of that trickster with all these string technique combinations. And so I could kind of dive into the different personalities of the rabbit. And in fact, that's how the whole thing opens, is with this percussion that you can't lock in, the time signature. It changes a lot. And that to me is Chokfi, just darting around in unpredictable trajectories that rabbits do, especially when they're being chased. And so that's literally that. And so then it goes into more with the tune comes in. And the melody is very inspired by a very good friend of mine who's Muskogee, Curtis Scott. And he is an expert Muskogee hymn singer, and I've just heard lots of his hymns, and I've actually orchestrated some of his hymns. And so this is one of those hymns. And so the melody that comes in with the low violins, and see, that's kind of like the timbre of where a lot of the male singers will sing, is kind of like that low tenor range. And so that's that melody, but I've couched it in this multimeter fashion. So do you see, I'm doing modern things with our folk music, and I'm also making it kind of pedagogical for the kids, and I'm painting the picture of this rabbit. So there's lots of those aspects that go on in the composing that I do, and you can probably tell that I really enjoy it. It's a lot of fun for me to do that. But I'm being a modern artist with my own people, and modern art has been modern ever since art has existed. So 5,000 years ago, in all cultures, all art was modern and was pushing parameters, and it was new for the time, and was doing all kinds of experimental things, whether it was in clothing or it was in music or it was in physical, two-dimensional or three-dimensional art, whether it was painting or sculptures. That's all over the world. That's been going on ever since humans have existed. So I just feel very timeless. I really love embracing old melodies and modernizing those, just like American Indians do in other mediums. So let me give you an example. So when we talk about the Santa Fe Indian Market that happens every single year, well, that's packed full of modern American Indian artwork that people fly in from all over the world to purchase because it's cutting edge, but yet it's still tied into ancient traditions. And so that happens all the time. Same thing happens with our poets, our modern American Indian poets. Like Joy Harjo is our third-time poet laureate for the United States of America. And she's a modern poet expressing her Muskogee identity with the English language in books. And so these are materials that we adapted, that we usurped from other cultures, just like we do with fashions. Like when you see somebody wearing something, like, oh, that's so cool, I want to get that, or I want to make something like that. We do the same thing in all these cultures. And so American Indians have adopted materials from other cultures from all over the world and made them our own in our own expression, just like everybody does in all the art. So we do that as modern American Indian artists as well. And that's what I'm doing in music.
I love that. And, you expressed that a little bit. We had a chance to speak a week or so ago before our San Juan Symphony String Quartet played your Pisachi, and you were talking a similar thread about how composers, dating back, have always incorporated whatever cultural influences were around them, the folk music from different cultures. And so you are a continuation of that, and capitalizing on the Native American and indigenous themes that you're exposed to. Can you tell us a little bit about I know you have a musical background that includes classical piano training and compositional training. Talk to us a little bit about how that segue occurred for you in terms of being a performer and then a composer.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I need to acknowledge my parents because they're where I came from. And so my father, Charles, is Chickasaw from Oklahoma, born and raised in Ardmore. And Dad went to school here at the University of Oklahoma and graduated with his Juris Doctor degree in law. And I became a tribal judge and special district judge and tribal attorney. And then also, very importantly, my dad is author to our current Chickasaw Constitution. And for those of you who don't know, all American Indian tribes, which is over 530 tribes, we all have our own constitutions that run in tandem with the United States Constitution. So we are citizens of our tribes. So I'm a citizen of the Chickasaw Nation and a citizen of the United States. So my dad was author to our current Chickasaw constitution under which our Chickasaw laws are derived and enforced. So that's my dad is really is important on that history. But also, Dad is a phenomenally trained classical pianist and baritone. And so I started the piano with my father, and I grew up with my father playing and singing classical repertoire in the house. And he's been in productions. I mean, he's been, oh gosh, Dad and I just sang for my sister's wedding, and he's 83 now. So we still perform together. So I grew up with a lot of musical and theater and opera from my father, along with an incredible exposure to tribal music all over North America, because my dad was just involved with so many different tribes. And I just am very versed in lots of tribal history and legal matters, and then also many cultures from all over North America. So the exposure I got from my dad was really, really quite comprehensive. So that's my father. My mother, Patricia, makes Irish. And so I am Manx and Chickasaw. And my mother was a professional choreographer and dancer, and she grew up in Lincoln, Nebraska. And my parents met here in Oklahoma. And my mother also studied at OU, and she studied with Yvonne Choteau, who was one of our famous American Indian ballerinas from Oklahoma, and Mikhail Terekov, who was a Russian teacher. And so we had a group of 5 American Indian ballerinas who were all international performers in ballet companies, all Russian companies. And so Yvonne Choteau was one of those, and my mother studied with her. And so there's that connection. But I grew up with my mom. I grew up in the world of modern American dance and ballet. So I was just saturated with a lot of different art from both Indian country and the classical world. And that heavily informs the things that I do. So when I was describing my work, Chokfi, and all those aspects, I'm very grateful because I was given those gifts of knowledge about all those things that I'm able to incorporate in my compositions today. So in terms of starting composing, it's really ironic. I actually was a piano major in Chicago at Northwestern University. And so I was, I'm Chickasaw and a pianist, and there we are. I was like, that's just what it was. But I did not see any kind of a marriage of those two identities. And my mother was creating a new ballet at the University of Wyoming, where she taught for 30 years. And she wanted to do a ballet that was topical of the area, based in American Indian stories from the Northern Plains and Rockies. So she consulted with her native colleagues in the area and came up with her architecture of stories that would create a good ballet arc. And then she turned to me and she's like, well, you're my Chickasaw pianist kid, you can compose the score. And so that was quite daunting, because I mean, look, I grew up with Tchaikovsky and Prokofiev, and I'm like, you're out of your mind. And of course, with all of this great American Indian art that was established, I mean, the pressure was quite enormous. And of course, Louis Ballard was our Quapaw Cherokee composer who had done the Four Moons Ballet. And I just, I didn't know if I could do it. So, but when she said this, it really struck a beautiful chord in my spirit, and I started thinking and hearing, and I couldn't stop. So I presented some music that I'd written on the piano for Mom, and she was like, "That's great, let's do this." So we did that, and so I composed my first composition was a ballet score for my mother, entitled Winter Moons, and you all can hear that actually on Spotify and all the channels, and it's on YouTube. So that came out. We recorded that in 1995, but I didn't start composing until I was 23 years old, and so my mom, in a very beautiful and innocent way, was asking me to be all of who I am at the exact same time.
That's really fabulous. So you've had, the Tchaikovsky and Prokofiev in your hands, and then you're asked to write some ballet music. I am seeing in Chokfi, just as a small example of your major oeuvre of work, some of these ballet influences. I mean, the opening, you mentioned that it is intensely rhythmical, but not regular rhythmical. And of course, there are many modern composers, Stravinsky and others, who embrace that same style of mixed meter. And that, in the case of this particular music, is stemming, correct me if I'm wrong, but is stemming from the kinds of rhythmical structures that you would find in some of these Native American indigenous hymns, like the sort of the rhythmic structure that underpins them. I've heard you give some examples using the shell shakers and some of the percussion instruments that are a part of this score. And that's for our audiences to understand that it both is a sort of marriage of that, Western dance style, but also coming directly from the Native American.
Yeah, and that's I really appreciate being able to talk about that, because multi-metered and also multimodal music, that exists in folk music all over the world and in Indian country. And for Chickasaw music, we have lots of social songs that are mixed metered. And so, but when you get into Hopi music, boy, do you get into mixed meter music. And so it can get very, very complicated and very intense. So Indian country does have that mixed meter aspects to it as well. And gosh, I mean, it's like even in powwow music, even though it may feel like an entirely steady beat, the phrasing of the songs over there, oh my gosh, the phrasing varies all over the place and will float over the beat in kind of a larger tripletish style that's really interesting and very unique, excuse me, to that style as well. It's just another example. But there's many, many approaches in our folk music of North America of those different meters, and also the types of irregular, phrases that we call in classical music when we're speaking technically about it. And some is also very straightforward and square. We've got lots of Chickasaw music that's just in a 3/4 all the way through, and so it just really. But within tribes, we have varied styles of music like that.
Well, and given that this was commissioned by the youth orchestra program and that you were having young people in mind, I admire in this piece that you do bring all of those different areas out. You have the sort of soaring melodies over, I love the sort of pizzicato accompaniment that's part of the middle section. And like you mentioned, there is the Muskogee chant that's underneath there, the sort of church hymn, but it's not as though it's like a Bartok or a Stravinsky. It's not like they're putting it straight on the face of the work. It's like you mentioned in the score, kind of an underpinning, right? It's part of the musical material, but not necessarily a showcase.
Yeah, it just depends on, and it varies from piece to piece. Sometimes I'll be much more deliberate about it, very clear. The romantic melody in the middle of the piece is actually that hymn in inversion. So I will do techniques that composers have been doing for a while. So that inversion, what that means is you take a melody and you flip it upside down, so you get another melody out of the exact same melody. And sometimes we'll play the melody backwards, and then you get another melody, and then you take that backwards one and you flip it over. So that's that typical prime inversion, and retrograde inversion that we do in theory classes. And many composers have done that for a very, very long time. And of course, Bach and Bartok are both great examples of doing that very, very deliberately. And so, in fact, my orchestration class just now was the string fugue from the Music for Strings, Percussion, and Celeste by Bartok, and just talking about all that stuff, because Bartok was doing that with his folk melodies as well and experimenting. But see, again, that's what modern artists do, is that we take our traditional materials and we mess with them, when we manipulate them in ways that we haven't done before. I'll give you an example. The shell that I'm wearing right now is a Dan Townsend. He's a Muskogee Creek artist. And this shell is typically a carving and etching into a shell, but he has done a 3-dimensional raise on this with Dremels. And so it's the same type of thing. So he's taken an ancient design and made it into a modern feature. So I'm just another example, but you're absolutely right. I'm doing all of that with these pieces, and that happens in all kinds of modern music and in our ancient folk music. It's really funny, because when you listen to ancient folk music from all over the world, a lot of it sounds very modern, like it was written yesterday. It's really it's amazing. I love that, and it's because we're humans, and still we're humans. And so I think that it's almost like when you're talking about art, time almost doesn't exist. It's just trends, about what we're doing with the exact same thing.
I love that.
It's like iterations of the same human condition is really what it is.
There you go. There you go. Yeah. And I do see you as a kind of modern day Bela Bartok. I hope that's a compliment. A great musicological mind, incorporating all of these different. And can you tell us a little bit about you describe how you have friends in all of the different nations, Native American nations around the country. How do you go about kind of cataloging, or is it just sort of oral traditions that you've heard and carried on, or is there some kind of archive that you're creating or working from?
Oh, it's all of the above. So I mean, all history is always in flux. And so, like, for instance, American Indian languages weren't written down until about 100 years ago or so as well. So there's developments all the time within our own cultures. So, like, for instance, like, if this is something, I love this visual, because when you go to powwows or stomp dances, a lot of times you see people out with iPhones recording our own music from our own singers, because that's how we'll learn something and we'll take it home and practice that. So as we speak, we have people that we'll go out to our own dances and record stuff with our iPhones and learn songs that way, because there's new songs that are being made. And also sometimes it's like, oh, that's that one, raccoon dance I don't remember, so I record it, I learn it. So we have different ways of doing that. We also have all kinds of our dances on videos that are up on YouTube channels, and our own tribal websites. We have video clips of our dances and special things that that we feel comfortable putting up online, that type of thing. So that's just like a really current thing. We also have lots of albums that we've pressed of our traditional music, and also of some of our more modern music. Like, we'll have different modern bands or composers, whatever this. So there's a lot of our singers who are traditional singers, but they've created new traditional songs, and they'll record those. Like the hymn that I talk about that came from Curtis Scott, well, there's lots of Muskogee hymns that are actually on CDs. I just remember about 10 years ago, there was a young Comanche singer just with a beautiful voice who had sung a whole bunch of Comanche hymns on a new CD. Kiowas have lots of their hymns on CD as well. There's, oh my gosh, there's so many. It's like this big 2 CD set that you can buy and listen to those. And so we take advantage of modern technology. We've been doing that for a very long time. And we got lots of, there were ethnomusicologists, Americans that went around, like Francis Denford and James Peck, who went around recording, and then we did it ourselves. We would pull out reel-to-reels back in the 50s and 60s and record our own family. And a lot of us have recovered a lot of those from our own families and shared those with people. So that will happen. So there's all kinds of ways. But of course, you learn when you go to dances and stuff like that. You learn the songs as well. But we've always had a kind of an incorporation of what technology is available, to be honest. And so I know songs in many, many different ways, and sometimes I will visit somebody and they'll sing for me and I will record it, because then I can learn it, I can repeat it as I'm driving on the car, as I'm traveling and stuff like that. So I'll do that as well. And so do lots of other people do the same thing.
Well, what a rich fabric of materials to work from. It's just it's absolutely incredible, the diversity that you include in your music. And you're right, the technology, I mean, it's all the way Bartók again, the wax cylinders back in the 1920s and 30s and all the technologies. He was advanced, that was a big deal to bring that technology to folk communities that had no idea or any connection to the
those were his own relatives too. I mean, remember, those are his families, so he had a mix of lifestyle himself that was both modern and ancient as well, because he was a conservatory trained pianist, but going back to his own families who were playing folk music, who didn't know how to notate this music, and so it was all an oral tradition as well for them. And so here he got this piece of technology, and he was able to preserve it and then notate everything. So he was the first ethnomusicologist of his own people. Like that. It was really, really good. So so I am very, very inspired by that. That spirit of Bartók, I think, is just beautiful. It's a great example for all people involved in their own ethnicities about documenting our own families. So look, my grandmother was an incredible picture taker. And so we have so many Chickasaw relatives that we can look at today because she took photographs and took notes on the backs of those photographs like people used to do in cursive, and dated. But my grandmother did that, and as a result, she was a very, very important tribal historian and ethnologist, and also genealogist of our people, because she did all that work, and so lots of people from the Chickasaw Nation would call grandmother, hey, do you remember this cousin? Yes. And she would totally tell people. She'd write it down, mail them information, all that kind of stuff. And so I kind of come from a line of thinkers like that from my tribe that were like that. But people have been doing that ever since they got it. When you share technology like that, that's what we do.
And here we are. I
know. We're on a Zoom on my new 12.9-inch 6th generation iPad that it's new for me, and we're doing this and talking about culture.
It's really it's really wonderful, and you're right. It has that wonderful timelessness, and I know that many of our audiences really connect with that. Really feel like the performances that we offer give them a connection to all different sorts of times and place. And I do want to also say, you're such a wonderful educator, both here in this format, talking about music, and also, again, writing for the youth. One of the fun things about our performance here of Chokfi is that it's with side by side with student musicians. We've had an audition opportunity. So there'll be some young people performing this music as well as our young adults in the orchestra. That's always a wonderful opportunity to bring different generations together. And with this music in particular, and going back just one more time, sarcasm, I've seen games, I've seen scherzo, I've seen all of these. I don't know that I've ever seen a sarcasm. Tell us, what is a sarcasm?
Prokofiev, he has the sarcasms for piano.
Okay.
And they're very diabolical. So I just totally ripped that word. I love that word. It's really, really great. It's just like, with Versace, I said that with the string quartet, I called them epitomes, because, a tome is a very large volume of work that's very dense. And an epitome is like a small piece that's got lots of feels. And so I was like, I just liked that word. I think words are fun as well. And so I'm having fun with the title, but I like that sarcasm because, Chokfi, it's in there too. It's because rabbit, if you've ever been bitten by a rabbit, you'll remember it, because they're not, it's not fun. So there is a very diabolical aspect of rabbits, and so that sarcasm thing is like, you gotta watch it. It's a trickster, and that word sarcasm is just really cool. But Prokofiev has his sarcasms for piano, and they have a lot, and some of them are lyric, and they have lots of mood swings in them as well. And I really like that about his writing.
I think our listeners will hear that too. In Chokfi, there's this wonderful middle passage that you talk about that includes the hymn music, the background, whereas we've been in a very sort of rigid and rhythmical place, then all of a sudden it becomes highly abstract and even aleatoric, where it's non-measured and improvisatory to a degree. And that is a whole nother sound world from the rhythmic drive that opens it. So you do get the different, like you say, you call it a character sketch of rabbit. And I think that there are those different aspects of the character coming through in the music. It's absolutely fun. And I think the strings and percussion are ready. The percussionists, of course, are the feature here in some ways, because they do play quite a battery of instruments. When you were making those choices, were you hoping to also kind of blend the two, sort of traditional percussion with some of the percussion instruments?
Yeah, I mean, there's a turtle rattle in there, and so Chickasaws are shell shaking. We're a shell shaking culture. That's our percussion, and of course that can be done with a turtle rattle, or you can use like fiber maracas, which are I have found fiber maracas to be like the best substitute. The percussion section is really, really wonderful, especially when you are crossing ethnicities like that, because the percussion section is the one that has all that crossover built right in, and percussionists are very big experts about that, and they have a lot of world knowledge of different percussion as well. So that's really neat to tie them in, because they're just so adept to doing all those things, and just kind of, if you put it on the page, they'll play it. They get it. That's my responsibility, make sure it's just really clear on the page. But yes, I do. I have that mixed in there, and I have lots of fun with that. I really, really enjoy that.
Well, in addition to us being able to have a chance to have a conversation, ordinarily I would take questions from the audience, but it is just the two of us here today. But we do have a wonderful collaboration that has been organized with the Navajo Preparatory School in Farmington, New Mexico. This is thanks to their teacher, Marty McCabe, and these are students at the high school level in a class called Music Explorations. So they have had the first semester going from medieval music all the way to contemporary. I really admire Marty and the approach here. And now they're sort of more into, my understanding is the theoretical side, music theory, and some of the aspects of musical structure and composition. And so they had a chance to listen to your music and some of the interviews online, and came up with a couple of questions that I would love to pose to you, and we will bring them back to our friends at Navajo Prep. These are students of the Navajo and Diné nations, and they come from the Farmington, Kirtland, and Shiprock communities of northern New Mexico. A lot of their questions, Jerod, had to do with what advice you might offer young musicians and composers. I want to read one here from a 9th grader. Was there ever a time you felt like giving up? And if so, how did you overcome it? And in a similar way, when you first started composing, can you recall times you didn't do enough and second-guessed yourself?
Wow.
Overcoming that, how do you deal with those issues?
Every human in the world has self-doubt and pause. About what am I doing? I mean, gosh, I'm a parent. I'm like, oh gosh, what am I doing? Am I doing this right? Am I really getting this? Am I helping or hurting my son? I have those questions going on a human level all the time, and that's a very, very normal thing for humans to second guess ourselves and to have pause in what we're doing. And so the answer is absolutely. I've had doubts all throughout my life about what I'm doing. And so I've had two very strong feelings. I've had a very passionate feeling, a very driven feeling of purpose. And then I also have feelings of concern that I will have. How am I doing? I check in with myself. Okay, how's my path? So I really do believe in my path. I really am excited about what I do. And I will say that was very inherited from my parents and my grandmother specifically. My grandmother Foshi was Chickasaw, and she was a very forward thinker and was very proud of her children and her grandchildren for being modern. And she never felt that being a modern American Indian meant you were less Indian. It just meant that you were modern. That's all it meant. So I felt had a lot of encouragement and a support from my grandmother and of course my father. It's like you can be a Chickasaw opera singer. That's because that's what he was. And so there's no reason. But and now I'm surrounded by colleagues in Indian country. John Harrington is a Chickasaw astronaut. Joy Harjo is a poet laureate of the United States. Jim Thorpe was the athlete of the century last century. Sterling Harjo is one of our finest filmmakers on Netflix right now. I mean, it's like the list goes on. We have lots of American Indians who pressed in new mediums and ways of life with great passion. And you can imagine all of us have had doubts and fears as we go along and wondering and looking to our parents, are we doing things right? And fortunately, there's been a lot of support. I can say this, I love the time that we're in because what I witnessed throughout Indian country is an amazing amount of support for our own people. When I see on all the socials, somebody's achieving something, oh my gosh, we get behind that. I see lots of our people rallying behind the success of other North American Indian people. This is really cool to see all this. And we see it in real time on social media. And so I'm very proud of when I see people succeeding. And, I'll give you a story. It's like last time I was teaching down at Hopi High in Polaca, that's in 2018 is the last time I was at that high school. I walk into their media room and it's like, here's all these, these iMacs plugged into the internet, and everybody was talking about the royal wedding that was going on at the time. Very, very plugged in. Here, what's considered a very isolated reservation area, and all of our Hopi youth were plugged in to the world news of the day and had very, very specific opinions about it. And they were conducting an interview with me with this very high-tech equipment that was really incredible. It's all full of Hopi people, and so I was very, very proud of that because we were being modern Indians, and I'm very proud of that. And so, and they, of course, they're wondering like, where is all their media going? And they're questioning what they're doing as well. But they had high drive and impulse, and they were trusting themselves on many levels as well. So I'm proud to see all that kind of stuff. And so what I want to tell people is these are normal feelings to have. If you didn't have those feelings, I think that would be a mistake. We're supposed to question ourselves. It would be a problem if you didn't feel overwhelmed sometimes. And so that's just part of being human, and also part of us growing and having that impulse to grow ourselves. So self-criticism is good when it's motivating and clear. We don't just want to harsh on ourselves. We want to have criticism that helps us grow and to maybe reevaluate and choose maybe a stronger path or a more clear path, that type of a thing. And then of course, I think about my ancestors. Would they be proud of this? Yes or no, Jerod? Yes or no? Is this the right way? And I think about that, and I believe that my ancestors are talking to me very clearly if I'm open to that, if I'm open to hearing it. But also, I imagine myself as an ancestor with my great-grandchildren. Would I be proud of them? And the answer is going to be very overwhelmingly yes. So I have a lot of trust. I feel like I have their love, as I will give my love to my grandchildren and great-grandchildren that I have not met.
Wonderful. And that you give to your students now, I'm sure.
That's very much. Yes, and my son. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's But I just it's like, if you think about that ancestral line, it's there. We get their love, and they worked very, very hard for us to be able to do what we're doing, and we honor them in succeeding. And then we are doing what we're doing so that our great-grandchildren can do what they're doing, and they will honor us in their success as well.
Here's another interesting question. I love that answer. Thank you so much for
your
insights here. This is from a freshman, Leela. How and why do you compose your music in such a radical way? Now, I wanna couch this question by saying, do you feel that your music is radical? And then there's another follow-up to that one. If you were to change your musical style, this is from Imika. If you were to change your musical style, what would it be and why? So,
oh my gosh, this is really, really great. I don't feel very radical. I mean, come on, I've got a 10-year-old son who's already looking at me like a teenager who thinks I'm like ancient as dirt. It's like, so I'm very complimented that a young person would say that. Thank you. That's really cool. So, I mean, I guess, I don't feel radical, but I do try to feel plugged in, I guess, is what it's kind of how it is. And so I feel like I have permission to do a lot of things. I mean, look at all of our other Native artists. I mean, if you look at modern American Indian visual art, oh my gosh, there's some really hip stuff going on. Very, cutting edge, especially in the filmmaking that we're doing right now. And there's a lot of music as well as cutting edge. I kind of feel like a lot of permission to kind of do whatever I need to do to express myself. I don't feel like, super yeah, radical. I mean, I do feel a little, a little old sometimes on that front, but I appreciate that compliment. But I do really feel permission. And so with that in mind, this, it's like, would I change any styles? I'm not going to say that I would want to deliberately like totally change what I'm doing, because I'm doing what I'm doing because it's organic from me. So I'm going to try to be me, but I'm also always trying to learn. And that's what I mean about being plugged in, is like, I hear look, this Spotify is awesome, because I will find something that I don't normally listen to, hit, the radio, like make a radio station out of it. And it takes me off into this new layer. And I'm like, oh, that is so cool. That absolutely affects me, because I think I want to do something similar. And so what I'm going to do with it is I'll take it this direction, but that's what art does. That's what invention does. I mean, when we're looking at new street designs, people in civil engineering do the exact same thing, is they'll borrow technological ideas from car makers or engines or battery powered, stuff for electronic vehicles. We're always riffing and bouncing off each other, so because everybody's plugged into what's going on. So as a composer, I try to be open and plugged into what's going on with other composers with all kinds of genres. So I wouldn't say that I want to change my style, but I always want to be influenced and learning.
I love that. Well, we have time for one more from a ninth grade student. What was your dream as a kid? Did you think that you would be where you are today? Was there any, I mean, it sounds like, yes, you had a musical and artistic upbringing. What was your dream as a kid?
I got to tell you, I love this question, because I was just talking to a native colleague of mine, because I'm working on a piece that's involving six different tribal languages in Oklahoma. And so I'm just contacting people to find people who are comfortable translating for a work that's going to be on the concert stage with a choir and everything like that. So this was a discussion I was having with a colleague of mine who's also Muskogee here from Oklahoma. And so I was talking to Ayla, and I said, we were both excited about the project. And I said, I feel so blessed to have this opportunity to do this. And I said, when I was 15 years old, I had no idea that I would either be capable or have the opportunity to do the things that I'm doing. So I look back with a lot of fondness of when I was a kid, going, you had no idea, bro, that this was coming up, and so it's really fun to think about that. But I really could not have imagined what was actually possible. I had dreams of being a musician and performing and being in the game. That was my dream. I did not know exactly how that was going to happen, but I knew I wanted to be a musician. I could say that. I love piano. I love music. All that and I ended up doing all kinds of things in my life. Like I toured Broadway, when I was in the 90s, when I was as a pianist. I've been a ballet accompanist for many, many years, and I've played all kinds of things as a pianist and done many, many different types and styles of music. And all of that has contributed. I had no idea I'd be on tour with Les Mis. I had no clue that I'd ever do that. Or Miss Saigon, that I was playing these tours with. And so then when the movie came out, I knew the score, and I had all kinds of opinions about Hugh Jackman as the lead and Russell Crowe and Anne Hathaway. Just all these. I had no idea that I would have a total working knowledge of that to be able to have this opinion when this movie came out. So I'm just really, really blessed about that. So I guess I had no idea. And so I would suggest that you always be open, and when opportunities come up, oh my gosh, do everything. Just do everything. When it comes up, have the opportunity, because you're going to learn, because it will eventually probably contribute somehow, even if it's that's not your specific goal. Soak it in, dig it, do it and enjoy the time that you're in that, because that's going to contribute to your wheelhouse in the future. And also, because of all that, I'm able to relay lots of experiences to Native youth that I think is really, really important. And it gives them permission to do the things that they need to do to have their experience. I'll tell you this was something that was important. As I was embarking into this symphonic career as an American Indian Chickasaw symphonic composer, I had my doubts, like we said earlier. And I was talking to my aunt, my dad's sister, and I was talking to Ann, and I said, Ann, I just don't know, if what I'm doing is significant to Indian country as a symphonic composer. And she goes, oh, honey, she said, Jerod, there are as many ways to be an Indian as there are Indians. And I was like, wow. And that was really beautiful. And I say that to Native youth today. There's many ways to be a Native person as there are Native people.
I love that.
And it applies to the world. We got 8 billion people on the planet. There's many ways to be a person as there are people in the world. And that's really beautiful. And so we can be very tied and very connected to our culture and also be a beautiful individual at the same time.
I love that. And you are clearly a student of life and have so much energy. We so admire you and appreciate having the chance to speak with you today, Jerod. And best of luck for all of the projects that you have in the works. Your commissions are flying off the shelves left and right. So happy for all your success. We look forward to performing Chokfi at the San Juan Symphony, February 10th in Durango, February 11th in Farmington, New Mexico. Again, thank you to all of our sponsors who make this happen. Jerod, any parting words from you?
Oh, I'm just so grateful to be a part of this, and just everybody get in the game, just enjoy life, be a part of it, and enjoy the piece. Use your imagination when you're listening to it, and I just hope you all enjoy, and I just really, really appreciate everything. Chukmashki, Yakoke.
Thank you. And we look forward to having our side-by-side students on stage and some of the students from Navajo Preparatory joining us for the concert in the audience in Farmington coming up on February 11th. Thank you all, and we will see you at the symphony. Thank you.